What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Fresh, back once again on Fightful Overbooked for another episode of Loving Wrestling. This time, I'm joined by someone that I consider Fightful royalty, maybe on the Fightful Mount Rushmore. I'm joined by the one and only Mr. Spotlight, Mr. Weekend Podcaster, Mr. Weekender Podcast, Stephen Jensen. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Fightful Mount Rushmore. That's a quite the compliment, but I'll take it. I've been with Fightful now for in some capacity since 2018, probably maybe 17. So it's been a while now. But yeah, I appreciate that. But I wouldn't consider myself on that Mount Rushmore, but I'll take the compliment.
I would personally, my friend. But as you know on this show, guys, we talk about why my guest loves wrestling. So if we take this back, Stephen, do you remember the moment that you were like, yeah, wrestling's my thing now. I love it now.
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard to pinpoint like exactly when I started watching wrestling, but the first wrestler I vividly remember being a fan of was the Macho Man Randy Savage.
Mm.
So, so I was a WCW kid growing up, grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, um, and I was born in 1988. So when I started watching wrestling, it was probably like 1993 or 1994. I was very young, and I was really drawn to Randy Savage, and I knew of Hulk Hogan as well. Because Hulk Hogan at that point was already like famous, like worldwide celebrity
Mm.
famous. And this is also back, pre-internet and everything, where just like whatever was on TV was what was famous, you know. So everyone knew Hulk Hogan already, and Randy Savage around that time was probably starting to pop up in the Slim Jim commercials as well. So, or at least that's when maybe I was starting to notice he was in those as well. Um, it's also a little foggy, right, with my timeline. I was a really young kid during all this, but I remember the first storyline I remember being invested in was the Dungeon of Doom trying to take down Hulkamania. It was the Taskmaster Kevin Sullivan, and I remember the debut of the Giant, who's now the Big Show, and I remember all that stuff when it all happened. So I would say what the first memory I really have though in my own head is like Randy Savage jumping off the top rope, flying elbow drop. Still to this day, my favorite move in the history of pro wrestling is Randy Savage's flying elbow drop off the top. So that's what I would kind of correlate is like me becoming a fan would be me becoming a fan of the Macho Man.
I understand what you're saying completely there. You brought up more moments from that, from when you first discovered wrestling and why you love it. But do you remember the specific match that you were like, okay, I understand what wrestling is now. This is why I love it.
So I could pinpoint a match that when I knew that I was like a massive fan and that I was probably going to be a fan for life was so once again I probably started watching I'll say like 1994 because that's when I can like really remember like the Dungeon of Doom storylines, and I remember the formation of the NWO in 1996. This was like when the internet had just kind of started, and I had like the AOL dial-up style internet, the really
Mm.
slow. But even back then, I would go like there was no Google even then. So like you would just there Yahoo may have existed, maybe not. Maybe like Ask Jeeves may have, like that was like what people used. And
Oh,
like
wow.
and I remember you couldn't, but like before I even knew those things existed, I would just go on like the web browser and just type in like wrestling.com, WCW.com, WCWWF.com. I would just try websites until it was like wrestling stuff. And I remember a website that typed out what had happened at Bash of the Beach 1996 because I couldn't watch it live on pay per view as a little kid. My parents would buy me pay per view. We didn't have access to pay per view. We didn't have one of
Mm.
those pay per view boxes. So like I remember being a huge fan from like 1994. NWO happens. That's probably the main moment I would say would be like the formation of the NWO is probably like that's the most important storyline that I've ever seen happen in my lifetime for like me becoming a fan and staying a fan. But like the main match during that for me was in 1997 Hollywood Hogan lost the WCW World Title to Lex Luger on an episode of Nitro in 1997, and I was in my friend's house. His name was Tom Jackson. I haven't talked to this guy in probably 20 years. And I'll never forget this guy because when we were little kids, we watched that episode of WCW Nitro at his parents' house. We must not have had school the next day or something because we watched it late at his place. And when Lex Luger made Hulk Hogan tap out to the torture rack, won the title, and all like the other WCW characters came out to celebrate with him, I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. Like I was so just hooked. And that would, I think that's probably the most important match of my childhood as far as like I'll always be a fan of wrestling after seeing stuff like that.
That's very cool. You brought up Tom Jackson there as a childhood friend. You loved watching wrestling alongside. So, in your childhood, who did you love watching wrestling alongside as well? And then
Yeah.
now, if you are to watch wrestling, say it be as part of Fightful or just as a fan, for lack of a better word. I was trying to think of a more cool word there, but I couldn't. I do apologize. And then, who do you love watching wrestling alongside nowadays?
Sure. So when I was growing up, like honestly, that's the only time I can really remember watching wrestling with Tom Jackson, which is this one time. But also when I was growing up, this was also the peak of, you know, the NWO, the peak of the Attitude Era, the peak of Stone Cold Steve Austin, you know, The Rock. Like this is so wrestling is massive mainstream, and I'm, you know, 8, 10 years old and stuff. So like everybody was watching wrestling at this time. So like you'd go to school and everyone was a wrestling fan. Everyone's wearing a DX shirt, everyone's wearing an NWO shirt, or everyone's wearing a Bill Goldberg shirt. You know, it's like so I would say as a kid, I watched it with like a lot of people, but then after kind of probably give or take around the time WCW and ECW went out of business is when I think a lot of the fans bailed, especially the ones around my age. Now, also granted, you get older and your interests change and you get more into like, you know, dating or, you know, life stuff, and people stop liking wrestling.
Adult responsibilities.
Right. Adult responsibility. Sure. And also just like for a lot of people, wrestling is just like a kid's thing that, you know, it's like a kid's show, you know, like I grew out of watching stuff like the Rugrats or whatever, you know what I mean? And like that's how a lot of people probably viewed wrestling as well and stuff. So like I get all that. But so I would say as a kid, I pretty much watched it with like any other friend that I'll say this is a guy I had a falling out with over the dumbest thing of all time. And if the guy would just call me and apologize, it'd be squashed. But I'll say his name. His name is Zach Epstein. But I used to watch wrestling with him all the time. And our friend Mikey Force. Our friend Mikey Force had he had a black box, which back in the day would unscramble the pay-per-view feed for free. So like his parents could get free pay-per-view at his house. And so we used to watch the WCW pay-per-views at his house. Me, Mikey, and Zach. So that's who I most remember as a kid. Oh, also shout out to my friend who I'm still kind of in touch with. This guy Hunter Knappen, buddy of mine in high school. We used to do trampoline wrestling together. We used to watch, and this was when WCW had just been purchased. So like we would watch like the Invasion storyline and all that stuff all together. We'd buy the action figures and then do the play fighting with like the bone crunchers and all that stuff. So like those would be like my buddies who watched it with me growing up. And then nowadays I mainly watch wrestling with unless it's like a watch along or something, which I rarely do. It's always nice, by the way, to be invited to those. I always appreciate that. But like I like just chilling and like I have a really good friend named Michael Hughes. We watch a lot of wrestling together. I've known him since high school. And my brother, who's around my age, he comes over pretty often. He's not a big wrestling fan, but he likes to, you know, hang out with us and he'll watch. My brother actually knows a ton about independent wrestling because he's around me so much. He knows more about indie wrestling than most people who cover indie wrestling, which is hilarious. But I would say my brother and Michael Hughes. Hughes comes over every Wednesday for AEW Dynamite, and we're going to AEW together in Duluth next month and stuff. So like we're really good friends. Have been for a long time. As a matter of fact, it's hard to see this, but this year is signed by Triple H, The Rock, and Steve Austin, and he gave me that as a gift. Like that's how good of friends we are. He
very, very
gave me that, you know. So anyways, yeah, shout out Michael Hughes. He's probably, you know, outside of my brother, he's probably my best friend. So
that's very cool. So you brought up there AEW and the fact that you tune in every Wednesday because
rocking an AEW shirt and
rocking the AEW shirt and
yeah. But this is the
As a-
WWE Cody Rhodes had, of course.
So it's a bit of a paradox at the moment, but
Yeah.
what I was going to say to that was like, you brought up the fact that you tune into AEW Dynamite every week because your friend comes over and you watch it.
Yeah.
What is the show? Is that the show that no matter what, say your friend was busy one week, is that the show that even if you didn't have a friend to watch it with, is that the show that you'd be tuning in to watch every week?
Yeah, I watch it. I watch it every Wednesday, regardless. He's not here every Wednesday, but he's here most Wednesdays.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood.
Yeah. Oh no. I know you didn't misunderstood. I said every Wednesday, but I he's here almost every Wednesday. It's a planned thing. Every Wednesday, I expect him to come over around like 7 p.m. like to get ready to watch Dynamite. Like, and if so no, I would if you're more or less asking me like what is like my favorite weekly like wrestling show, like what don't I miss? It's definitely Dynamite. Collision's becoming that too recently. Like I think Collision is can't miss television. I rarely watch Raw. I watch Raw when I know Cody's involved. Even though the point I had box seats to Raw this past Monday. They were in Atlanta, and Cody opened the show, which was great because I watched his entrance. I stayed there for about another half hour and I drove home. So it was
wow.
But I need to know what's going on in the WWE to a degree so I can talk with Jeremy about it on the spotlight. But that's if I wasn't doing the spotlight, I would pretty much only be paying attention to Cody when it came to that company. And then I obviously I'm massive into indie wrestling. That's what I spend most of my time watching is like various independent promotions, GCW, especially. So
I understand what you're saying completely there. So that is a very cool there. That is very unprofessional. I did just have to look at my notes to remind myself the next question. I do apologize.
There's nothing wrong with that.
So you brought up there the fact that Dynamite is your thing. Before we do if you stopped loving wrestling side of this, what is 3 moments from the current product that, as we record this in July 2023, as I always tell my guests, I never know when these are going to air. I just send these to the powers that be and I let them do their thing. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So what is 3 moments from the current product in July 2023 that you're like, yep, I love that. I love that.
Oh,
that's my thing. And then what is 3 moments from the past, Stephen? And to clarify the past, I view anything that isn't currently going on as the past. So I would view, for example, how do I explain this? Any debuts from like last year sort of thing, anything that isn't a current storyline as the past.
Okay, I got you. Okay, so
I think I explained that well. Like,
no, I get what you mean. So I would say that's tough because it's tough because I watch such a variety of wrestling with the indies that I cover. So like stuff that's like current, because that'd be where most of my answers probably come from. But like current day, I might have to go back first to like, so you're basically asking 3 moments from history that I just really so like so speaking of like being live at something, I would say I was really fortunate to be live at WrestleMania 30 when Bryan Danielson won the world title at the end of the show. That was a great moment. So that really is something for me. I was also live when the Hardys returned at WrestleMania 33 in Orlando. And that was one of the biggest pops I've ever been a part of. That was incredible. Probably my favorite moment in the history of professional wrestling is Cody Rhodes hitting the throne at Double or Nothing 2019.
Oh wow!
So that was, I was literally crying on my couch. That was the most emotional I probably ever until Cody wins the world title. That's the most emotional I've been watching wrestling probably in my life. Like currently, man, I thought it was really cool. Masha Slamovich beat Nick Gage for the GCW title earlier this year.
Oh wow.
Trying to think, like AEW is just constantly doing stuff like this. Like the MJF CM Punk dog collar match. I know that wasn't like super recent, but it was recent enough that I would consider it like current, because it's still a storyline that is going on between the two of them. I thought that
after the tease this week on Collision, I would agree with
you for sure. So like I would say really anything that has to do with CM Punk and MJF, I really enjoyed. Anything between MJF and Darby Allin, I also really enjoy. I love their ongoing story with like the headlock takeover, and I think eventually Darby's going to beat him with a headlock takeover, maybe even for the world title. So I'm trying to think. Oh, of course. I mean, other Cody Rhodes related stuff, like Cody Rhodes returning at WrestleMania against Seth Rollins. That was humongous for me, obviously. So I would say that kind of stuff, and then I'd have to like really think about like individual, like for instance, like a really heartfelt moment that just happened last weekend. Manders won the Scenic City Invitational Tournament out of the Chattanooga, Tennessee area, and he's a guy I've been watching wrestle for years. Saw him come up. He was a guy who I used to watch wrestle in Nashville in the Basement East years back, and he was a guy who would just like show up, just trying to like set up the ring and just get a spot on the show. And now he's like this big member of the second gear crew on the Indies and then MLW and GCW, and he just won this big tournament. And so like I love seeing that kind of stuff too. People like Billy Starks, like watching Billy from literally her dad Mouse, who's his name's Robert Bellamy, but he's a ringside photographer, and then he's the father of Billy, and he told me about Billy when she was probably 13 or 14 years old when she started training, and I've watched literally her entire career happen in front of me, and now so I get emotional. Like those are the kind of moments I really enjoy, is like knowing she signed with AEW, seeing her as a part of AEW, and just seeing somebody go from a literal kid to a woman and be so good at something so young. Just like that's the kind of stuff that I really enjoy about wrestling the most. Outside of Cody related things, that's my biggest joy, is watching like the progression of like indie talent become big. If that makes sense.
Very much so. You brought up there Cody related things. Why is it that, just out of interest, because I'm very curious, that Cody Rhodes or the Codyverse is probably your favorite thing in wrestling? Why does Cody Rhodes speak to you so much as a performer?
Oh, because I went to high school with him. It's straight
What?
bias. Oh yeah, it's straight bias.
I
Yeah.
never knew this.
Oh yeah,
I genuinely
100%.
never knew this.
Yeah, I don't know if I have what I have like in my office or not. But yeah, I've got like pictures of like our old like high school wrestling
That
team.
might have been something that was public knowledge with Fightful, and I never knew that.
Oh yeah, most people know.
I never knew that. I do apologize.
I lean super hard into it. That's the, because I know it rubs some people the wrong way, and I just think that's kind of funny. But no, it's straight bias with. Well, here's the thing: it's biased, but it isn't, because on one hand, like, because I got to see this guy win 2 high school wrestling, state championships right in front of me. It was like amazing. I've been a Cody Rhodes fan since Cody was probably 16 years old and I was 14, if that makes sense. So I was a fan of him as an amateur wrestler before he got into professional wrestling. Dusty Rhodes used to come to our matches. Like Dusty Rhodes, people need to know this about Dusty. Dusty Rhodes was such a cool guy that he wanted to just be like every other parent. Like, and he was a god in my area. Like everybody knows who the American Dream Dusty Rhodes is in Atlanta, Georgia. And Dusty would come to all these matches, and sometimes he'd have Diamond Dallas Page with him, or he'd have like the Steiner brothers with him, or like DDP. I always had DDP, but we'd have like random Glacier would come to matches, and Glacier was actually one of the lacrosse coaches at my high school. Glacier,
wow.
which is such a small world. Ernest the Cat Miller, my brother sees almost every day up the street at a boxing gym. Like there's like,
I forget you were in Atlanta, which was WCW Central anyway.
Yes, massive WCW country. So like, so anyway, now I've lost my train of thought though. What was my point with all of this?
Cody High School.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. So Dusty used to come to the matches, and and people need to know this about Dusty. Like he used to do what all the other parents used to do, which I used to think was super cool. Like he'd come to the matches, he'd like grill hot dogs, he'd pull ticket stubs, he worked with the other parents, like doing just the regular concessions duties and like the stuff that the other parents were doing for the kids, like when he really didn't have to. I mean, like people were just like happy that Dusty Rhodes was willing to show up to like just to show up somewhere. Like it was just cool being around the guy. But not only that, he'd stand next to my dad and grill hot dogs and sell them, for a couple bucks to make money for the team. And so I just thought it was really, really cool how humble the guy was. As a matter of fact, it was cool. It was super cool because I got to see when Dustin was making his return. He had some highs and lows, and he had left the WWE. He had done this really, in my opinion, a bad run in TNA as a Black Reign.
Yeah.
and he was trying to get back in shape to get another run in the WWE. So he actually did some training like with us at our high school wrestling gym to like get back in shape to go back to the ring. In the summers, they used to set up a wrestling ring in our wrestling gym. In over the summers at our high school, they put a wrestling ring there, and Dusty Rhodes and our high school wrestling coach Steve Day, they would in Glacier would do wrestling training. So I used to see Cody do moonsaults off the ropes in high school, like before he was even in wrestling. I
That's
used to see him
very
training
cool.
and stuff. So like I've been with him the whole ride as a fan. You know what I mean? So that's a kind of a shortened kind of version, because I could talk for hours about just that and how
I feel
important it
like
is
that's a
for
podcast
that.
in itself. Like,
It 100%, but that's also why I'm so attached to like he needs to win this world title after
mm,
all of this, after leaving WWE, after doing the indie run, after the Bullet Club, after AEW, like to be back, like finishing the story to me is incredibly important. And I mean, I even have conversations occasionally with his sister, like through direct messages, and like just little things here and there where we're both like super bummed when he doesn't win and stuff, you know, we're like with like
yeah, yeah.
emotional support, you know. So shout out to Teal Rhodes as well. She's super sweet. And she was on screen on Raw on Monday, which was cool too, with their family. So yeah.
That's very cool. It's obvious that wrestling is tied to you emotionally and sort of because of your connections with Cody and just wrestling in general by the sound of it. But have you given any thought, Stephen, to what you would do if you were like, if you stopped loving wrestling? And we'll also do the wrap up question while we're there, which is, do you think you will always be a wrestling fan?
So those definitely go hand in hand. Um, so when I got into wrestling, I was just a kid who just liked it. I thought it was really cool.
Mm,
I love the characters. Like I said, I was drawn to Randy Savage. And then you can kind of tell throughout, you know, my favorite wrestlers in history are Randy Savage, Chris Jericho, and Cody Rhodes. And I mean, Shawn Michaels is like right there as well. And then I've got other guys like Sting that's like real close and stuff. And a lot of those guys are like, you know, very rememberable for a lot of different reasons. Guys who were able to reinvent themselves, guys who had a lot of longevity, and stuff like that. Um, but like the reason wrestling is like way more important to me. Like now, it's more as a fan, it's more the Cody stuff, more the indie stuff. But like my mom had breast cancer when I was younger, and she passed away from it, and
oh,
so did my grandma, so did my aunt, and my brother also. Luckily my brother's doing incredible now, but he had some really bad neurological stuff when we were younger, had to get some really massive surgeries done for it. And
mm,
there was just a lot of like trauma and stuff, you know, like when I was growing up, there's like a lot of emotional stuff that was really kind of hard to deal with. And on top of that, like wrestling at one point stops becoming cool, and so like everyone's telling you, I compare it, and I don't mean this comparison to sound, I don't want this to be the wrong way, but I compare it somewhat to probably being like a closeted gay person, because when at certain areas when we were growing up, you were constantly told like wrestling was stupid, wrestling was fake, you shouldn't like
mm,
wrestling, you're stupid if you like wrestling, you're gay if you like wrestling, all these things. And so like I was constantly my whole life being told like to stop liking this. And I would like be by myself in my room. Like I'd imagine there's a lot of people out there that are like struggling with their own sexuality or something like that. They're sitting in the room, and I was the same kind of way with wrestling, going like I would actually literally be like, God, make me stop liking this. Like everyone thinks I'm weird. I don't want to hang out with my friends. I'd rather watch Nitro. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather watch
mm.
Raw than like go drinking with my friends. I want to be normal. Like make me. I don't want to like this anymore, but like I like it too much. And after a certain amount of time, now the reason this all is full circle with this is because wrestling for me, when I was dealing especially with like my mom's sickness, it was incredibly important having that escape at least once a week, to just have 3 hours for me, which was just like 3 hours every Monday where I could just escape from the world and just watch wrestling and
Mm.
just get lost in it. And I think that's incredibly important for other people, not just kids, but just all people to have something like that. So that's why I think it's so important that wrestling succeeds. That's why I think it's so important that the WWE succeeds specifically, because that draws kids so well, to where like I think wrestling can help get a lot of kids over a lot of stuff. I really respect people like John Cena who are for the kids and who do all these make-a-wishes. And that's another thing where Cody comes in, because I think he wants to be that guy. He wants to be the make-a-wish guy. He wants to be the for the kids guy. And I think that that's just really, really important to have all that. So I would say, and by the way, after once I started, I can't exactly pinpoint when, but eventually I just stopped caring about what other people thought. And that was like the most freeing feeling ever. Was like, you know what? I love wrestling. I'm going to lean into this. Like, I'm going to podcast about this. Because when I first got into like radio, I was in high school. I was doing high school radio, and I would do an MMA podcast. And I loved doing that. But I was like, man, I would really love to do a pro wrestling podcast. So like, eventually I started doing a pro wrestling podcast, which eventually spawned into other things that eventually got me stuff with Fightful and whatnot. And like, but eventually I just stopped caring. I started buying wrestling clothes. I was like, you know what? I'm going to start supporting my favorite wrestler. Instead of wearing a button-up polo with this little horse on it that I don't know nothing about, I'm going to go buy an indie wrestler's t-shirt. I'm going to wear that out to the bar. I don't even care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, I just kind of got to the point where like, I really lean the fan right now. If I was to leave my place right now, I'd be wearing this. I'd be wearing a Cody Rhodes hat and AEW t-shirt and going out, to the mall or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so if that could be any kind of, I don't know if inspiration is the right word or not, but like that's kind of where my head's at with all of it. Is like, I think wrestling is really important for people to have that need that escape. I also think that's why a lot of people fight about wrestling, and I think it's incredibly unfortunate. Because I think people are so passionate about it because they care so much about it because it means so much to them that when somebody says something that differs from their opinion about it, they get very defensive and they want it their way. They fantasy book things in their own mind. They want their favorite wrestlers to be pushed, so on and so forth. But it all comes from the same place, and that's why I wish more fans would get along with each other. Because at the end of the day, if you're a massive wrestling fan, you should be friends with anyone that's a wrestling fan, because there are not that many of us out there in the grand scheme of
We're
things,
on our own island enough. There's no need for infighting.
We're already the niche of the niche. Like why? Like just because I don't like LA Knight doesn't mean that you can't. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't. Just because I love Cody doesn't mean you don't have to like. You know what I mean? Like it's all good. It's all different, and it's all for everybody. It's all become incredibly inclusive. For something that's so like male dominated, so like testosterone, like its history. It's pretty cool seeing like now all these people from like all these different backgrounds, like different sexual orientations, everybody. Like wrestling really has become this like melting pot of like everybody of every background, which I think is like really, really cool. And you see it represented on all these shows too. So that's what I love so much about wrestling, is all that like it's something for kids to believe in. It's something that everybody can get involved in. And it's something that I think is just really cool to watch. It's these people are superhuman out here doing this stuff that they're doing. I can't do a backflip, and these guys are doing. You know what I mean? Like it's wild what these people can do. And to answer the other part, I'll never stop loving wrestling. I could see myself. I think I'll be out of wrestling media before. Like I'll be a fan longer than I'm in wrestling media, if that makes sense. Like at some point this will end for me. Someone that's better at doing what I do will come along.
I don't know about that. I definitely don't know about that part.
But it is what it is. Like there's always going to be. I don't think there's people like gunning for me or anything like that. But I think it's like I think there's space for everybody. Especially with all these platforms and stuff. It's really cool that like anybody can do these things. But like the one saving grace is there's guys out there like Dave Meltzer that I still love, that like they're the OGs that are like still doing what they do, like that kind of stuff gives me hope, and knowing like maybe when I'm, in my 40s, my 50s or 60s or whatever, maybe I'll still be able to sit here and talk about wrestling and people will care about that. But like, realistically speaking, let's say I have another handful of years where people care about me at all talking about wrestling. I think after that, I'll still be a wrestling fan, if that makes sense. Even like MMA, I had a really bad breakup with like my MMA media stuff. I don't really want to get into, but like I still watch UFC all the time. You know what I mean? Like it just because I stopped covering it doesn't mean I'm not going to stop loving the actual sport or whatever. So
I know exactly what you mean there. To be honest, I think that's a beautiful way to end this, Stephen. And to be honest, without sounding really cheesy, I think this has been the most emotional episode we've done so far. Probably the most honest as well. So I do want to thank you for coming on. Where can the good people find your work on Fightful and all the other places as we wrap this up?
Sure, yeah. Thank you for having me on here, by the way. This was cool. I would say if you want to follow me, check me out on Twitter. It's fight talk underscore FIGHT TALK underscore. Listen to the Fightful Select Weekender podcast. If you want to know more about independent professional wrestling, especially, a lot of the people that you're seeing on mainstream TV right now, I've been talking about for years on that podcast. So it's like, if for no other reason, if you just want to be kind of tapped in to kind of like the underground wrestling scene and kind of know what's going on before they, a lot of these wrestlers blow up, I would say the Weekender podcast is one of the best places, in my opinion. You can listen and know about that. Like if, for instance, right after we record this, I'm going to record the Weekender for today, and it'll go up. And just in this show alone, we've got spoilers for Impact, spoilers for Ring of Honor. We've got BLP results. We've got GCW results. We got MLW results. I mean, we got NXT Level Up results. I mean, I cover a wide variety of stuff that isn't getting like a ton of coverage. So please check that out. It's over on FightfulSelect.com. And then, of course, every Thursday morning, you can watch the Spotlight with myself and Jeremy Lambert. That's every Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. We will probably move the show eventually to 8:30 a.m. Eastern. But I always let people know when there's time changes. But yeah, check that out. We cover everything there too. WWE, AEW, Indies. We do interviews with a lot of wrestlers, promoters, other fans, YouTube creators.
I've been on there.
Tom's been on there, absolutely. The plan is to have I don't know when this is going to drop, but whenever y'all hear this, there's most likely an interview available that we've recently recorded with Manders, who I was just talking about, who won the SCI.
Oh, wow.
He should be appearing this Thursday, or whenever y'all hear this, some Thursday on the Spotlight. But so yeah, check that out, youtube.com/Fightful. And then I pop up 4 times a year on the Impact post shows for the pay-per-views over there on Fightful, and just various stuff. Fightful Overbooked, Degrassi dudes every now and then with SP3 and stuff like that. So you can find me on Fightful.com. But yeah, thanks, Tom. I once again, I appreciate you inviting me on here. This was fun, and I'm glad that I was able to now 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 you know where the Cody Rhodes stuff comes from.
I never knew that, but that is so cool. That is very cool, my friend. So as we wrap this up, guys, I want to say thank you to Stephen for coming on, but also thank you for always being one of the nicest people to me when it comes to this stuff. Thank you for helping me get started with my wrestling media journey. Thank you for just being incredibly cool to me. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Fightful Overbooked. Follow Fightful on all their social medias at Fightful.com, and subscribe to Fightful Select, best $5 in the business. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Tom Talks Rubbish, where I interview the greats in wrestling media about their overall fandom and balancing it as a content creator. This fine gentleman has been on there. And also follow me on Twitter at Tom Talks Trash, and I will see you in the next episode of Loving Wrestling. Goodbye now.